Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. It is me, Curly K, and I hope that my heater in my room is not too loud. Y'all probably wondering why I got a heater on, because it's cold in this house. Okay? Anywho, welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to review Sunset Park, because we're going to continue on with the sports drama movies. Okay? If you haven't already, please be sure to watch my Swagger playlist. If you haven't watched Swagger on Apple TV, what are you doing? Tune in, log on your Zoom, and watch Swagger. Period. We're trying to get to season 3. Also, if you have not, be sure to check out my Bel Air series, because I am reviewing Bel Air. Since people want to be on strike and since these platforms don't want to pay these people, we ain't got much to watch now, because ain't nothing coming back for a while. So, tune into my Swagger series, my review series. Tune into my Bel Air review series. Tune in to my Love and Basketball review. Tune in to my Shooting Stars review. And turn into my hurricane season review. And stay tuned for all the rest of the reviews I got coming. But today we are going to discuss Sunset Park. Okay, y'all, at the tender age of 31, I have never seen Sunset Park. Sunset Park came out in 1996, so at the time I was 4. That is why I ain't never seen it. Anyway, I see they had a few familiar faces in there. My good brother Stacy from The Wood, who played Alicia brother, was in there. Michael from Moesha and the Parkers played in there, and Q. And like, I ain't gonna hold you, when I was growing up and I was watching Moesha, I had a crush on Q. I just thought Q was so fine with his little New York accent, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so Sunset Park came out in 1996, and it was 1 hour and 39 minutes, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 13. You know what? Sometimes I don't agree with Rotten Tomatoes. You know, sometimes the reviews be spot on, and then some movies I be like, I don't even know if we watched the same movie. But yes, y'all, so Sunset Park took place in New York, so it was different from all the other movies that I've watched. Love and Basketball took place in LA. Shooting Stars took place in Akron, and Hurricane Season took place in New Orleans, Louisiana. So this was my first, basketball movie that I've watched that took place in New York. The basis of the movie is that there's a female coach coaching men's basketball, a high school men's basketball team. And they just was not giving sis the respect that she deserved as a person, let alone a coach. This movie came out in 96, so I think, the WNBA hadn't even started yet, and if it did, it was a baby. I mean, it was early in infancy. Women's basketball players, let alone women coaching, was just not a thing then. So when you do watch this movie, you do have to watch it with the lens of the time, because I know, 1996 was almost 30 years ago. There's been a lot of change in 30 years. So some of the things that, took place in this movie are probably, outdated now. But for the time, it was, the thing. So, like I said, this lady was working at a high school. In order for her to get extra money, she decided to coach the boys basketball team. Her dream was to, after the basketball season, to go and open up a restaurant in St. Croix. The coach, which I forgot her name and I should have wrote it down, but we just gonna refer to her as Coach. She seemed to be a person who went through a lot in life, and she had seen a lot of failures and hadn't had many victories. And so when she started coaching, I feel like she felt and she finally realized the value that she had. They showed her having a lot of men problems, even when her boyfriends ended up, taking some stuff out her house. And, she just, didn't seem to have it all going for herself. I wrote down my notes. I'm not sure if she was a new teacher or had she already been looking there, because that part wasn't really established, but I just assumed that she was already working there. And the team is terrible. They seem like they've gone through coach after coach after coach, and it doesn't seem like any coach is sticking with them. The players don't really have trust for her. And some of the guys even flat out say, I will not be coached by a woman. I'm not listening to nothing she's saying. I'm just not. And so, in order for her to try to feel comfortable, mind you, she has no basketball experience whatsoever. She knows nothing about the game, might I add. So this is completely different, because I was discussing with my husband last night that out of all the movies that we've watched so far, all the coaches have had experience or have once played the sport in all of the movies that I watched. But with this movie, it was completely different. She had never coached basketball, and I don't even think she knew anything about basketball. So she took it upon herself to read a few coaching books, you know what I'm saying, so that she can get herself more familiar with the game. And she even started watching some NBA games. Mind you, they are in New York, so they're around the Knicks. The Knicks are down the street. You know what I'm saying? So, because at the time you have to realize that the Nets were not in Brooklyn yet. They were still in New Jersey in '96. So you had the New York Knicks, and then the Jets, the Nets were down the street. So she ended up getting through to just a few of the players, and they took some time to, help her understand the game. They gave her a clipboard, and they started showing her, like zone defense and man-to-man. Started showing her some plays, just, help her out. But the team is highly dysfunctional. So 4 players that stuck out to me were Spaceman, who was played by Terrence Howard, Busy, who was played by the dude from The Wood, Michael was Drano, the dude who played Michael on Moesha. Q from Moesha played Shorty. And then there was another guy called Butter. He was a post player. Let's see. During their first game, they were on the way to, the game. They were waiting outside, and their bus was late. The school bus that was supposed to be taking them to the game was late. And so once they got on the bus, they were already like up in arms. The coach was not happy with the bus driver. And come to find out, on the way there, the bus broke down. So in the middle of the street, they all had to get out and get on the city bus so that they could make the game in time. And they were still late, might I add. When they arrived to the school, none of the men coaches respected her. They all looked at her and laughed. Even the referees were rude to her, because, he was just like, you need to sit on the bench and shut up. Like, in so many words, that's what he said. And so they just were not taking her serious, and they did not give her respect as a lady. But they ended up winning that game. And so she ended up, walking past the coaches at the end of the game and was just like, yeah, that's right. You got beat by a girl. How you feel? And I was like, I know that's right, Miss Ma'am. Because, listen, I know that we tend to live in a male-driven society. But at the end of the day, the women is what be getting the job done. Period. It just is what it is. So as the story is progressing, everybody comes to practice and everybody seems a little down. And she goes in the locker room. Mind you, if you're watching this movie and they're getting, disrobed in front of her, this was another time. They ended up telling her that Busy ended up getting shot. And So once she found out that news, she went to visit the hospital. Busy was so happy to see her. Like, he lit up when she walked in his hospital room, and he was there with his mom. And come to find out that Busy basically was walking through a certain part of New York, and he took a shortcut home, and his mom had been telling him not to take that way home. But he had on this very expensive coat, and so since he didn't want to give up his coat, he ended up getting injured, and he said somebody shot him with a 38 and that it had went straight through, and so that he would be missing a couple of games. Now at this point, Busy had never got in a game, and it just looked like Busy was kind of like the nerd who made the team. But come to find out, Busy came in clutch. Okay, we slept on Busy because we had no idea. Next thing we had Spaceman comes to find out had a background. We don't know what he did, but he was on probation and he already had 2 strikes. And so Spaceman was the one who, partook in the herb. And he was always on another level all the time. But this one time, Spaceman came to the coach's office, and he basically told her that he wanted to harm his teacher because his teacher always made fun of him. And so she ended up taking, a harmful object from Spaceman, because I gotta frame certain things here on YouTube because you can't say certain stuff because the churn might be watching. So Spaceman had something that he was gonna harm his teacher with, and coach removed it from him. And then she asked him, why did he feel this way? And so come to find out, Spaceman, mind you, the coach is Caucasian. And he went and talked to her. And, the guys were starting to feel comfortable with her now. And so he went to her and was just like, basically, my teacher, he treats me like I'm nothing. He always is talking to me funny, picking on me, bullying me. And he had on a hat at the time, and he was like, when I took my hat off, my teacher started making fun of my hair. He was like, these are my braids, this is how my people wear our hair. And so he just was real hurt about it, to the point where he seemed like he was gonna be in tears. And so the coach took Spaceman by the hand, walked him to his teacher's classroom, and jacked his teacher up, and was like, this kid is one of the sweetest, most smartest kids I know. He likes science. He likes these subjects, and you need to stop picking on him, stop picking on his hair. She was just like taking up for Spaceman, and I was like, yes. And I felt like that was a moment of, awareness that was ahead of its time, because to this day, people, African American students, have still to this day go through situations where they are teased for their hair, their styles are not deemed acceptable, or are viewed as distractions, and they're not, because it grows from their scalp that way. So I thought that was a good little moment of awareness, that was ahead of its time. After this moment, she started getting stricter with the team and realizing that she has to set some kind of boundary with them for them to respect her, because not all of them respected her at the time, only a few of them did. And so she gave them homework, basically was like, bring me a quote about winning game or something like that, or how to win a game. And none of them took her seriously. So she went in that gym and she ran them. She made them do wall sits, she made them run suicides, and she made them do 6 inches until they was hurt and they was, about sick and throwing up. And so she was like, if you continue to not do what I say, and if you don't bring me no quotes, you would do this again. Because now they were starting to win. Because in the beginning, they was bad news bears. But then, they started winning a couple games. And so, my next note that I wrote down was, Shorty just asked his coach out on a date. And I felt like it was a little weird at this point. Nothing inappropriate happened, but I just thought it was weird that, I don't know. It just didn't feel right. Nothing happened, but it just didn't feel right. So basically there was this girl that Shorty was liking, and this girl was basically using Shorty for his money and taking advantage of him. But he had a crush on her, and it was Alicia from the Wood. Melinda Williams is her real name. But she ended up playing him for Shazza from Different World. Listen, Shazza was fine. I'm not even anyway, back to basketball. So yeah, so he had a crush on her, and so he had wrote her this note, and he was asking the coach about, like how he should approach her, and then she was saying, is she deserving, just trying to give him advice. And so basically, he asked her a question, a really interesting question, and he was just like, what is it like being white? He asked her, do she have any people of color living in her neighborhood? Because in his neighborhood at the time, he was saying that there's people who have done well in life that live in the projects, and there's people who do absolutely nothing in life and live in the projects, but yet they both end up in the same place. So basically he was just giving his coach the perspective that he has. So basically he was just like, I never was taught to want or achieve more, because even if I did achieve more, there's a chance that I may still end up in the projects. And so he was asking her, like, what was her perspective on everything? Did she ever go to college? Or was she told to go to college? Or what was her dreams? What was her aspirations? And she ended up telling him that she wanted to, she was going to leave the team at the end of the season and open up a restaurant. And this right here hurt Shorty, because Shorty had really taken a liking to the coach. He finally felt like he had somebody that was there for him and believed in him and, just advocated for them. Like, sometimes people don't realize, like, how influential a role like coach is in a child or a teenager's life, because especially if they don't have the foundation at home, if they find somebody they really look up to, it makes a difference. Which is why, like, in shows like All American with Billy and Spencer, or in Swagger with Jason Ike, or even in Bel Air when you had Will and Doc, like, a coach, means a lot to a kid. Like, they just mean a lot, and they played like this really particular role where they pretty much can go to them and talk to them about anything if they feel comfortable enough to. And so it really hurt Shorty, but he didn't say nothing in the beginning. But then when she came back, well, then I don't know if it was the next day or a couple days later, but when she went back and they was gonna have practice, the principal came up to them and was basically like, I got a couple of your players that cannot play. Like, they not eligible because they flunking. And so basically, she was like, well, I didn't know that, there were certain stipulations for them to play or whatever. And he was just like, well, you took this job, so you're supposed to know what's going on. But she was just like, how can I know if nobody ever told me anything? She's never coached before. So she went to the locker room to talk to the guys or whatever, and come to find out, she addressed the ones who were flunking. Drano was going to class. He was smart doing all his work. He was passing, but he wasn't going to class. Then you had Butter, who was going to class but was flunking. And then I think somebody else was I think Spaceman wasn't passing either. But come to find out, Shorty was still selling herb, and Spaceman hadn't passed his probation. And so she wanted to get all of this nipped in the bud. But Shorty ended up basically walking out and telling the whole team that, she ain't no good coach. She ain't doing nothing but leaving us. She gonna leave us as the season over. Go, like, he pretty much just like aired it all out. And then he basically was like, forget you, and he left. And so come to find out, a couple days later, she came to practice. Shorty was missing. They was like, where's Shorty at? She got to a game actually, and Shorty was missing. And one of Shorty homeboys came on the floor and was like, Shorty ain't gonna be able to make the game. And she was like, why? And then somebody told her Shorty was in Rikers. So Shorty had basically got arrested for assault with a weapon. And apparently Shorty has a record as well. And so this was not a good look for him. And so she basically was like, I know Shorty, he's a sweet kid. He would never do anything like this. So she went and got one of her lawyer friends to basically help Shorty get out of jail. She asked Shorty, like, what happened? Shorty told her the story. Well, Shorty told her an inaccurate version of the story. So basically, the lawyer friend ended up getting Shorty out. He went to court. She got him off or whatever and got him another chance because she said that he was a good kid and that the coach was there to advocate on behalf that Shorty was, at this place on this date. Basically, it seemed like it was a lie. I ain't gonna even hold you. It seemed like it was a lie. But, that's neither here nor there. So, she got Shorty off. She asked Shorty, Shorty was still mad at her. They had a conversation. She told Shorty he was off the team and, he told her that he lied to her and that, he just told her what he wanted to hear or whatever. And so Shorty was around. And so after that whole thing made her feel bad because, she thought that she was going in a good direction with the kids. And then come to find out, that whole thing with Shorty kind of threw her for a loop. So basically, she ended up going to the bar and getting intoxicated. And so on her way home, when she finally got to the outside step of her door, Shorty was out there and he was getting intoxicated as well. And they was basically just having a back and forth conversation about how he felt. He was like, you're a good coach and you don't even know you're a good coach because you don't care. And he was just basically telling her how he felt. And then she was listening to him. He begged her to get back on the team or whatever. And so, I think she finally, understood what it was. What her role was and how it could feed her in a good way, because these kids were looking up to her or whatever like that. And so, after that, I think they had a couple of more games or 1 or 2 more games before they were supposed to go to state or the championship game. And they were supposed to play the championship game at Madison Square Garden. I think at the time they were 15-3. So they had a really good season so far. And so after they, won the last couple of games or whatever, she hadn't told them that she wasn't going to leave yet, but once they got to the championship game, they ended up playing Washington Heights, and they were playing really badly in the beginning of the game, and they were down real bad by halftime. But she went in the locker room. The coach gave them a good pep talk, and when they came out of that locker room, they turned up. They turned up on Washington Heights. Now, what I didn't expect was for them to lose the championship game. Typically in movies, the underdog tends to be victorious. There are some cases where, they go to the championship game and they lose. But this wasn't one of the ones, because that wasn't the vibe I was getting from the movie. I was like, oh, they're going to win. It's going to be like hurricane season. They're going to come from the trenches. And then, they're going to come out victorious. No, they lost. They lost the championship game. And so when they went back into the locker room after the championship game, she ended up telling them that they have no reason to feel like they failed. They have done way more. Her outlook on her life has changed because, things are different. Things are, at a very different place. And so she ended up telling them that she was not going to leave them, that she was going to coach next year, and that she can't wait for the school year to start, so that the next season they could, start planning on how they going to win the championship game. And the guys' faces just lit up. They were just so happy to finally have somebody who really, wanted to be there for them, to coach them and to be with them. And sometimes that's all kids really need, to just know that there is a person that is there and that cares about them and that's going to stay there and that's not going to leave them. That's somebody that can depend on. You know what I'm saying? So that was like the basis of the movie. Again, a couple of themes that I took away from this movie that I thought were important was the value of coaches, the whole hair situation with Spaceman, and the thing with, women in sports. But again, this was the late 90s. The world was not where it is now. There were not a lot of women coaches. Women's sports were not where they are now. And there were not that many professional women athletes like that as well. So, outside of the few things that were like weird, like him and her, like the coach and Shorty, going out and being kind of close, nothing, inappropriate happened again. It was just weird. But would I have given this movie a 13%? No. I would have given it at least a 50%. Because on Rotten Tomatoes it got 13%, but then it says 80% like this movie. I feel like this movie is like one of those classic black movies, early 90s movies. A lot of movies in the early 90s or in the late 90s or just in the 90s period showed a lot what black people were going through, especially like post the crack era, and how a lot of people, especially in New York, lived in the projects or, were affiliated with the street some way, and that they had like things like basketball to help them, stay out of the street and to do something productive. Who was this movie by? It says produced by Danny DeVito. I thought this movie was good. It had one of my like favorite songs on it, "Keep On Keeping On" by Escape and MC Lyte. That song was so hard. I didn't know that song was actually on the soundtrack until I watched Moesha and I looked up the song one time, but that was many years ago. Like I said, I would at least gave Rotten Tomatoes could at least gave this movie a 50. I do feel like I wanted to know more about the coach. One thing that I feel like they kind of brushed over and that was missed was like her development of the game. How did she become familiar with the game? We just had a couple of scenes with her like reading a book and watching a few basketball games and then the students talking to her, but they didn't really show like the work she put in to be like a coach. It just kind of seemed like she winged it a lot. I mean, if she winged it, that's, the basis of the movie. I mean, it's just something that they decided to have in the movie, but I just was looking for a little bit more. I was also looking to get to know the players a little bit more. For the most part, the players seem to have a brotherhood. It was just a dysfunctional one. Nobody on the team really had no real beef like that. It wasn't like hurricane season where, Brian was the thorn in everybody's side and he wasn't getting along with nobody. Now, we did have a couple of moments where they was all selfish and they didn't want to pass the ball and everybody basically was out there on the court trying to showboat. But we really didn't get to know the players the way I wanted to get to know the players. Like for example, well, I can't use Love and Basketball because that movie was like singular, just focused on Monica and Quincy. But like in Shooting Stars, we got to know LeBron. We got to know, Drew, Willie, Sion. We got to know Rome. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like we got to know the players the way I wanted to in this movie, and maybe that was not the focus, but I do feel like since this focused on a winning basketball team, that's like an aspect that, it's kind of common that you get to know the players. Would I recommend this movie for someone to watch? I would recommend this movie to watch if you haven't seen it by now. I don't know when this review is going to come out, but at the time in which this video is being filmed, the movie is on Tubi. It was my first time seeing it, and I don't know how long it's going to be on Tubi because I don't know when this review going to come out and when y'all going to see it. So, I think that's all I have. Stay tuned. Again, if you haven't Watch my Love and Basketball review. Watch my Hurricane season review. Watch my Shooting Stars review. Watch my Swagger review. And watch my Bel Air review. And I'm going to keep bringing y'all content. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at CurlyK919. And on Instagram at CurlyK919. And I'll be back with more videos. Deuces.